My name is Madison, and I came into this world as an afterthought, born to parents who were already in their 40s and had a 10-year-old daughter they considered more than enough. We didn't plan for you, my mother would often say, not maliciously, but matter-of-factly, as if stating the weather. If it wasn't for your grandparents' insistence. She'd trail off, leaving the rest unsaid, but the message was clear: I was here because my maternal grandparents had convinced my reluctant parents to have another child. They were overjoyed at the prospect of a second granddaughter, while my parents viewed me as an obligation they hadn't asked for. My sister, Sarah, was already deep into her own world of teenage concerns when I arrived. She wasn't cruel or mean, she simply acted as if I didn't exist. While I played with my dolls in the corner of our shared living room, she'd be sprawled on the couch, talking on the phone about boys and college applications, completely oblivious to my presence. "Sarah, honey, don't forget your SAT prep books," Mom would say, carefully arranging them in her backpack. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for someone to notice I needed help with my homework. But help rarely came from my parents. Instead, they developed a routine that shaped my entire childhood. Every morning, they'd drop me off at my grandparents' house. "You wanted her," my father would say to my grandfather, keys jingling in his hand as he prepared to leave for work. "She's all yours." My grandparents' house became my real home. They picked me up from school, helped me with my homework, took me to the park, and made sure I was fed and cared for. Only late at night would my parents come to collect me, usually looking tired and slightly annoyed at having to make the trip. "Madison," my grandmother would say, hugging me goodbye each night, "you're the best thing that ever happened to us." And in those moments, wrapped in her warm embrace, I could almost forget that I wasn't wanted elsewhere. This pattern continued day after day, year after year. While my sister prepared for her bright future, I learned to navigate life as an afterthought in my own home. But my grandparents' love was constant, unwavering, and it was in their home that I learned what it meant to be truly valued. One day, my grandfather would tell me as we worked on my math homework, "You'll understand that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." He'd wink at me, and for a moment, the weight of being unwanted would lift from my small shoulders. With Sarah away at college, I thought things might change at home. Maybe my parents would finally see me, the daughter who remained. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Madison," my mother's voice reached me before I could even drop my backpack after school. "The house needs cleaning. Start with the bathrooms." What had once been Sarah's chores now became mine, along with a host of new responsibilities. The washing machine became my constant companion, and I learned all its quirks and settings by heart. The housework seemed endless. "You live here, you need to contribute," my father would say whenever I showed the slightest hesitation. "Your sister always did her part." By the time I was 14, I had graduated from cleaning to cooking. It wasn't a gradual transition. One day, my mother simply stopped making dinner. "You're old enough now," she announced one morning. "We expect dinner ready when we get home from work." That first night, I made spaghetti. It was slightly overcooked, but edible. My parents ate in silence, then my father looked up from his plate. "Tomorrow, try something with chicken," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. My only escape was dreaming about college. Every night, after finishing the dishes, I'd retreat to my room and browse university websites. I'd imagine myself walking across different campuses, far away from the endless chores and cold silences. Then, when I was 16, Sarah came home with news that changed everything. She bounced through the front door one Sunday afternoon, dragging a tall, well-dressed man behind her. "Mom, Dad," she squealed. "This is James. We're engaged." You'd think someone had just announced they'd won the lottery. My parents literally jumped from their seats, my mother crying tears of joy. My father was already pulling out his phone to call relatives. "We'll pay for everything," my mother declared, hugging Sarah. "Our first daughter's wedding has to be perfect." The wedding preparations consumed our house for months. Every conversation revolved around flowers, venues, and guest lists. Money seemed to flow like water, designer dress, premium vendors, top-tier everything. My grandparents attended the wedding but seemed uncomfortable with the extravagance. I caught my grandmother frowning at the ice sculpture that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. Grandfather just shook his head at the champagne fountain, but they kept their thoughts to themselves. 2 years later, I sat at our dinner table, 3 college acceptance letters spread before me. After years of playing Cinderella while maintaining straight A's, I'd been accepted to all my top choices. My heart raced as I told my parents the good news. "That's nice," my mother said, not looking up from her plate. "But we can't pay for it. We spent all our savings on your sister's wedding, even took out a loan for it. There's nothing left for college." "But, you paid for Sarah's college," I stammered. "That was different," my mother replied. "We saw potential in her." The silence at the dinner table was deafening after my mother's words about potential. I sat there, acceptance letters suddenly feeling heavy in my hands, as my parents continued eating as if they hadn't just shattered my dreams. "You should get a job," my father said between bites. "Save up some money, take out a student loan. That's what responsible adults do." I left the table without being excused, something I'd never dared to do before. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called my grandmother. Within minutes, I was walking through their familiar front door, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, sweetheart," my grandmother pulled me into a hug while I told them everything between sobs. My grandfather's face grew stern as he listened, but there was a glimmer in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. When I finished, they exchanged a knowing look. "Madison," my grandfather said, taking my hand, "we'd been expecting something like this." "What do you mean?" "We've watched how they've treated you all these years," my grandmother explained, "how they spent money on Sarah's education, her wedding. We knew they might do this to you." My grandfather stood up and walked to his study. When he returned, he was holding a folder. "We've been saving for your education since the day you were born," he said, opening the folder to reveal bank statements. "You can choose any of those 3 colleges. We've got you covered." That night, I went home and packed my things. Not everything, just what I needed. My parents were watching TV downstairs and barely looked up when I told them I was moving in with my grandparents. "Whatever you think is best," my mother said, her eyes never leaving the screen. Was that relief I heard in her voice? The next few weeks were a blur of college preparations. I chose to study financial analysis. Somehow, watching my parents' mismanagement of money had sparked an interest in doing things the right way. My grandparents helped me with every detail, from filling out forms to buying supplies. When I finally started classes that fall, it felt like stepping into a new world. The material was challenging, but I loved every minute of it. Each class felt like a step away from my old life and toward something better. My professors noticed my enthusiasm, and soon I was staying after class to discuss complex financial concepts. For the first time in my life, someone besides my grandparents saw potential in me, real potential. My second year of college was in full swing when my grandmother called with some interesting news about Sarah. "Your sister's having trouble," she said during one of our weekly calls. "Her marketing career isn't taking off like she hoped, and James can't seem to hold down a job. They're constantly asking your parents for money." I wasn't surprised when she told me they were getting it. "Your mother emptied her retirement account last month to help them with rent," my grandmother sighed. "They just can't say no to her." A year later, the situation got worse. Sarah and James couldn't make rent anymore, even with our parents' help. They moved back into my old bedroom, the one I'd spent years keeping spotlessly clean. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My professors had helped me land internships at prestigious financial firms, where I discovered I had a real talent for solving complex financial puzzles. Each challenging project made me more certain I'd chosen the right path. "You've got a natural instinct for this," my supervisor at Morgan Stanley told me during my performance review. "We'd love to have you back next summer." I kept my head down and focused on my studies, barely thinking about my family except during calls with my grandparents. But when I visited them during my senior year, I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through their door. My grandmother's usual warm smile seemed forced, and my grandfather, usually quick with a joke, sat quietly in his armchair. The house felt heavy with unspoken words. "What's wrong?" I asked over dinner, watching them push food around their plates. "And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you both too well." They exchanged a look I'd seen too many times before, the one that meant they were trying to protect me from something. Finally, my grandfather spoke. "Your parents came to see us last week," he said, his voice unusually tired. "They wanted their inheritance early." "What do you mean?" I put down my fork. "They're in trouble with the banks," my grandmother explained. "Multiple loans, credit card debt. They said they needed $200,000 to avoid bankruptcy." "And you gave it to them?" I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. My grandfather nodded. "We had to, Madison. They're still our daughter and son-in-law, despite everything. It was most of our savings, but..." "Most of your savings?" I was furious. "After everything they've done? After how they keep enabling Sarah's irresponsible behavior? After how they treated me?" "Sweetheart," my grandmother reached across the table to take my hand. "We know you're angry. But what's done is done. We'll be fine." But I kept getting angry. My parents, who'd never had money for my education, who'd treated me like a servant, had the audacity to demand money from the only people who'd ever truly cared for me. All because they couldn't say no to Sarah and couldn't manage their own finances. My hard work paid off after graduation. With glowing recommendations from my professors and impressive internship experiences, I landed a position at one of the top financial firms in the city. The starting salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of making. I found a modest one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy but clean and safe. Every morning, I'd wake up grateful that I didn't have to cook breakfast for anyone but myself. My career flourished as I threw myself into each new challenge, earning promotions and bonuses that my younger self couldn't have imagined. Within a few years, I had enough saved for a down payment on my own place. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I couldn't help but think of my parents and Sarah, who'd never managed their money well enough to buy property. Not that they knew about my success, we hadn't spoken in years. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandfather had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. My grandmother, who'd been by his side for over 50 years, seemed to lose her spark after that. Less than 2 months later, she followed him. I was arranging my grandmother's funeral when I heard a familiar voice behind me at the funeral home. "Madison? Do you want some help with the arrangements?" I turned to find my mother standing there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, but something in her expression made me hesitate. "Sure," I heard myself say. "That would be nice." Over the next few days, as we planned the service, my parents began to open up. They were struggling, they admitted. Retirement hadn't been kind to them financially. "We barely make ends meet," my father confessed one afternoon while we were picking out flowers. "And with Sarah's twins." "Twins?" This was news to me. "Yes, 4-year-olds, my mother jumped in. "Such beautiful boys, but they need so much. Sarah and James still can't manage on their own, so we help where we can." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Some things never changed. A week after we laid my grandmother to rest, we gathered in a wood-paneled office for the reading of the will. I sat across from my parents, with Sarah and James slouched in chairs beside them. The room smelled of old papers and furniture polish, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The notary, Mr. Patterson, adjusted his glasses and began reading in a monotone voice. I expected the usual legal jargon, but what came next made everyone sit up straight. "To our beloved granddaughter, Madison," he read, "we leave our house at 1542 Maple Street and the sum of $150,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mouth fell open, and my mother gripped my father's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and continued, and a personal note from Mr. Henderson to his daughter, Margaret. He looked at my mother. The note reads, "Margaret, remember that we gave you $200,000 when you needed it most. This is our final decision, and we trust you will respect it as we respected your needs then." My mother's face flushed red, then pale. My father stared at the floor, while Sarah and James exchanged worried glances. After the notary finished and gathered his papers, my parents approached me in the parking lot. The confident demeanor they'd shown during the funeral arrangements was gone, replaced by something almost desperate. "Madison, honey," my mother began, her voice trembling, "you have to understand, we always thought we'd inherit the house. We were counting on it. We're struggling," my father added, running his hand through his gray hair. "The mortgage, Sarah's family's expenses, we could really use the house." I looked at them both, remembering all the years of neglect, the constant reminders that I wasn't wanted, the refusal to help with my education. "No," I said firmly. "The house is mine. That's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." They continued pleading, following me to my car, but I stood firm. Sarah joined in too, talking about how her boys needed a yard to play in, but I simply got in my car and drove away. A week later, my phone rang. It was my mother, asking me to come over for dinner. Something in her voice sounded different, humbled, perhaps. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Pulling up to my childhood home was like stepping back in time, except everything looked shabbier than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the gutters sagged, and the once pristine lawn was patchy and overgrown. Inside, the house was crowded but clean. Sarah's twins, Tommy and Jake, ran circles around the living room while James half-heartedly told them to settle down. The boys were cute, they had Sarah's eyes and James's curly hair. "Madison," my mother smiled, pulling me into an awkward hug. "We made your favorite, pot roast." "That's not my favorite," I said automatically. "That's Sarah's favorite." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by my father clearing his throat. "Well, why don't you tell us what your favorite food is? We'd love to know." And surprisingly, they seemed genuinely interested. Over dinner, they asked about my job, my apartment, my hobbies. They actually listened when I talked about my work in finance, though I could tell most of it went over their heads. That dinner led to another, then another. Soon, I was joining them for holidays, bringing gifts for the twins, even helping Sarah with their homework sometimes. When they mentioned the house needed repairs, I found myself offering to help. I paid for a new roof, fixed the heating system, repainted the exterior. Each time I wrote a check, my parents would tear up with gratitude. "You're too good to us," my mother would say, hugging me. "We don't deserve this." You're right, I would think, but never say it aloud. Because despite everything, despite all the years of hurt and neglect, some small part of me still wanted to believe people could change. The years passed, and my career continued to flourish. Each promotion brought new opportunities, and my investment portfolio grew substantially. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents seemed to strengthen. They were getting older, both were over 70 now, and I found myself wanting to do something meaningful for them. "I'd been thinking," I said during one of our Sunday dinners, watching my father struggle up from his chair. "This house isn't really suitable for you anymore. I want to buy you a new house. Something single-story, with a nice garden, but easier to maintain. Something that would be comfortable for your retirement years." Their reactions surprised me, actual tears of joy. We spent the next few weeks house hunting together, and finally found the perfect place, a beautiful ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood, with wide doorways and no stairs. After closing my checkbook, my parents couldn't stop talking about how excited they were. "We need to have a proper housewarming party," my father declared. "Let us arrange everything. It's the least we can do." "That would be lovely," I agreed, planning to present them with the deed during the celebration. "Just let me know when." Weeks passed. I was busy with work, but I kept expecting an invitation. When nothing came, I started asking about the date. Oh, we're still planning, my mother would say. You know how these things take time. We want it to be perfect, my father would add. We'll let you know soon. Something about their vague responses niggled at me. One evening, after another deflecting phone call from my mother, I found myself typing Sarah's name into Facebook. I hadn't looked at her profile in years, we weren't connected on any social media. There it was, posted just hours ago, so excited for mom and dad's housewarming party this Saturday. The new house is gorgeous, can't wait to celebrate with everyone. The post had dozens of comments from relatives and friends, all confirming their attendance. Photos showed decorations being set up, caterers being booked. This wasn't a last-minute gathering, this had been planned for weeks. My hands shaking slightly, I called my mother. Hi Mom, I kept my voice casual. Just checking in about the housewarming party. Have you set a date yet? Oh honey, not yet, she replied smoothly. Probably in a couple of weeks. We're still working out the details. We want everyone to be able to come. Everyone except me, apparently. That Saturday, I parked my car a block away from the house I'd bought. Music and laughter drifted through the evening air. Through the large front windows, I could see dozens of people milling about, relatives I recognized, friends of my parents, Sarah's social circle. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was, they were expecting everyone except the person who actually owned the house. I slipped in quietly, following the sound of my father's voice, to the living room. And after all these years of hard work, we finally did it, he was saying to a group of attentive listeners. Bought our dream home. Don't forget about Sarah, my mother added proudly. She helped so much with the down payment. Such a wonderful daughter. Always taking care of her parents, someone commented. Unlike some people, my mother said pointedly. You know, our younger daughter hasn't helped us at all. Probably too busy with her career to care about family. I stood in the doorway, heat rising to my face as I watched this performance. Sarah beamed beside them, her 7-year-old twins running between the guests in the house I'd bought. Actually, I said loudly, making everyone jump, I think you've got that backwards. The color drained from my parents' faces. Guests turned to stare at me, whispers rippling through the crowd. Madison, my father recovered first, his smile tight. What a surprise. I'm sure it is, I replied, stepping into the room. Especially since you forgot to invite me to the housewarming party for the house I bought. Dead silence fell over the room. Sarah's husband suddenly became very interested in his shoes. Well, my mother's voice had an edge to it, what's done is done. You bought it, yes, but it's ours now. You can't expect eternal gratitude. That's right, my father added, gaining confidence. And frankly, you're not welcome here. This is a family gathering. And Sarah and her family will be living here too, my mother announced. They've already sold their house. It's all arranged. I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, harsh sound that made several guests step back. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a folder. You seem to be confused about something, I said, opening the folder to reveal the deed and ownership papers. This house belongs to me. I never signed it over to you. I was planning to give it to you tonight, at what I thought would be a proper housewarming party. My mother's face went from pale to ashen. My father started to sputter. And now? I turned to address the stunned guests. Now, I'd like everyone to leave. This is my house, and the party's over. You can't do this, my mother's voice rose to a shriek. We're your parents. No, I said quietly. You're just the people who gave birth to me. My real parents, my grandparents, taught me that family means more than blood. They also taught me about finances, which is why I own this house and you don't. They left in tears, my parents, Sarah, James, the twins, and all their guests. I watched from the front porch as they drove away, one by one, until the street was empty. After a few weeks, I learned they'd used the money from selling their own house to buy an apartment. Sarah, James, and the twins moved in with them. They tried calling me for weeks, but I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. The house? I sold it a month later and put the money in my account. Someday, I'll have my own children, and I promised myself they'll never have to earn my love or compete for my attention. Unlike my parents, I'll love my children equally and unconditionally, the way my grandparents loved me.
Hey, I'm Nathan, your average 18-year-old high school senior counting down the days until I can break free and head to college. After years of hard work, it's finally paid off. I scored a scholarship to Westfield University. It's no Ivy League, but it's a great school, and I'm stoked. Now, let me give you a snapshot of my family. There's me, my parents, and my younger sister, Amber. She's about to turn 16, and believe me, she's the golden child. Don't get me wrong, my parents aren't bad, but they definitely have a favorite. Nathan, can you set the table for dinner? My mom called from the kitchen. Sure, Mom, I said, grabbing the plates. Need help with anything else? No, that's fine. Amber's busy with her homework. Typical. Amber always seemed to be busy when there were chores to do. Anyway, let me tell you about my pride and joy, my car. It's just a used Honda Civic, but I worked hard for it. Mowing lawns, washing cars, you name it. I saved every penny for 2 years, and that car is my ticket to freedom when I head to college. Later that evening, my best friend Mike stopped by. Dude, you ready for the big move next month? You know it, I grinned. I can't wait to hit the road in my sweet ride. Mike glanced out the window and lowered his voice. By the way, your sister was checking out your car pretty hard when I pulled up. What's her deal? I sighed. Who knows? Probably planning her next move to get Mom and Dad wrapped around her finger again. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Olivia, my girlfriend. Hey babe, still on for our study date tomorrow? I smiled, typing back, wouldn't miss it. You're the best support system a guy could ask for. Later, as we all sat down for dinner, I noticed Amber's eyes drifting toward the window where my car was parked. I felt uneasy, something was brewing, and I had no idea how bad it was going to get. As Amber's sweet 16 approached, the tension in the house was thick. One evening, I was chilling in my room when I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs and listened in. But Mom, Dad, it's not fair. Everyone else is getting a car for their sweet 16. Amber was saying. Honey, cars are expensive, Mom started. We can't just. What about Nathan's car? Amber interrupted. He won't even need it at college. His scholarship covers on-campus housing, right? My heart froze. Was she really trying to take my car? That's Nathan's car, sweetie, Dad replied, though he sounded uncertain. He worked hard for it. But I need it more, Amber insisted. He can always get another one later. Please, it would make my birthday perfect. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Furious, I stormed into the room. Are you serious? That's my car. I worked for 2 years to buy it. Mom looked startled. Nathan, we didn't know you were there. We were just discussing. Discussing giving away my car without asking me. I shot back. Amber turned on the waterworks. It's not fair. You always favor Nathan. Dad sighed. Nathan, calm down. We haven't decided anything yet. But I could tell they were considering it. This was insane. Over the next few days, the atmosphere was tense. I tried talking to my parents privately, explaining how much the car meant to me, but they seemed distracted and non-committal. Then, the bomb dropped. We were having dinner when Dad cleared his throat. We've made a decision about the car. My heart sank. I knew what was coming, but it still hit me like a punch to the gut. We think it would be best if Amber takes the car, Dad said. Nathan, we promise we'll help you get a new one when you really need it. I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. Are you serious? That's my car. I paid for it with my own money. Mom tried to calm me down. Honey, we know you worked hard, but Amber needs it more right now. You'll be on campus, and what? My feelings don't matter. I snapped, my voice rising. Amber sat there with a smug smile, and I lost it. Fine, I shouted. Take the car. Take everything. I hope you're happy, Amber. And you too, I said, pointing at my parents. I hope you realize what you've done. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I walked for hours trying to process the betrayal. My own family had chosen Amber's wants over my needs again. When I finally made my way back home, I realized something. Things would never be the same. I felt like an outsider in my own family, and the worst part, this was only the beginning of the storm that was about to tear through our household. The next day, I met up with Mike and Olivia at our favorite diner. I needed to vent, and they were always there for me. They really did that? Olivia asked, shaking her head in disbelief. That's so unfair. I know, right? I feel like I'm losing it. Am I overreacting? I asked, frustrated. No way, man, Mike said firmly. That's your car. You worked your ass off for it. We need to figure out a way to stand up to them. This isn't right. We spent the next hour brainstorming, but nothing seemed quite right until Mike had an idea. I bet this isn't the first time Amber's pulled something like this. Maybe we should do some digging. A light bulb went off in my head. You're right, she's always getting away with stuff. There's got to be more to it. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Amber. She was always on her phone, acting secretive. Then, one afternoon, I overheard her talking on the phone. No, Mom thinks I'm at study group. We're good. Suspicious, I decided to check her room while she was out. Hidden in the back of her drawer, I found crumpled report cards with grades way lower than the ones she'd shown our parents. I texted Mike immediately. Dude, I think I'm onto something. Can you come over? When Mike arrived, I filled him in. His eyes lit up. I've got an idea. Give me her phone for 5 minutes. What? How? Trust me, he said, grinning. I'll create a distraction. You grab it. 20 minutes later, Mike had worked his tech magic. We had access to Amber's social media and texts, and what we found was shocking. Holy crap, I muttered, scrolling through the messages. She's been skipping school, lying about her grades, even sneaking out at night. Mike nodded grimly. This is big, man. Your parents need to know. Meanwhile, things at home were still tense. Mom kept trying to talk to me about the car. Honey, I know you're upset, but try to understand. Amber really needs this. I just shook my head and walked away. I couldn't even look at them without feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. That night, lying in bed, I realized I couldn't count on my family anymore. It was time to start planning for my future on my own terms. I pulled out my laptop and started researching part-time jobs near campus. If I couldn't rely on my parents, I'd find a way to support myself. As I worked, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. My family had let me down, but I wasn't going to let that define me. I was going to succeed, with or without their support. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the garage. I ran my hand over my car, soon to be Amber's car, feeling a pang in my chest. But as I turned to go back inside, I squared my shoulders. I had the truth now, and it was time to use it. Little did my family know, their perfect little world was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one to bring the hammer. The day had come to confront my family. My hands shook as I clutched the folder of evidence, gathering everyone in the living room. What's this about, Nathan? Dad asked, looking confused. I took a deep breath. I have something you need to see. I laid out everything, hidden report cards, screenshots of texts and social media posts, all proving Amber's lies and deceit. Mom gasped. This can't be true. Amber, tell me this isn't true. Amber's face went pale, then red with anger. You went through my stuff. That's an invasion of privacy. Is it true? Dad demanded. Amber burst into tears, but I could see the calculation behind them. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make you proud. I scoffed. More like you wanted to manipulate them. My parents looked shell-shocked. We need to think about this. Amber, go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later. But I could already see the hesitation in their eyes. They were making excuses for her. That's it? I asked, incredulous. After everything she's done. Mom reached out to me. Nathan, we understand you're upset. No, you don't understand. You never have. That Friday night, we got the call. Amber had been caught street racing in now her, car. She'd been arrested and the car impounded. We rushed to the police station. Amber sat there, mascara streaked down her face, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. What were you thinking? Dad yelled. I'm sorry, Amber wailed. I didn't think. No, you didn't. The officer explained the situation. Amber's license was suspended, and she was facing serious legal consequences. My parents looked devastated. As we drove home in silence, I could feel the shift. The scales had finally fallen from my parents' eyes. The next morning, they came to my room. "Nathan, we owe you an apology," Mom said, her voice trembling. "We've been blind, and we've treated you unfairly." Dad nodded. "We're so sorry, son. We want to make this right." But it was too late. The damage was done. "I appreciate that," I said coldly, "but it doesn't change anything." As the days passed and my departure for college approached, I made a decision. I put my car up for sale. "What are you doing?" Mom asked when she saw the for sale sign. "Taking control of my life," I replied. I sold the car for a decent price and used the money to buy a better, more reliable one for college. When my parents offered to help with the cost, I refused. "I've got this," I told them. "I don't need your help." The day finally came for me to leave for college. As I packed up my new car, Mike and Olivia came to see me off. "You ready for this?" Mike asked. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be." "You're going to do great, Nathan. We believe in you." My parents stood awkwardly by the door. Mom was crying, and Dad looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Amber was nowhere to be seen. Last I heard, she was doing community service and attending mandated counseling sessions. Dad finally spoke up. "Nathan, we're proud of you, and we're sorry for everything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Despite everything, a part of me still loved them. But I couldn't forget what had happened. As I drove away, Mike and Olivia following in Mike's car for the road trip to campus, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I was leaving behind the toxicity, the favoritism, the betrayal. Amber would have to face the consequences of her actions, and my parents would have to live with the realization of how they had treated me. As for me, I was moving forward. I had a fresh start, a chance to build a life on my own terms. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. The open road stretched out before me, full of possibility. I turned up the radio, smiled at my friends in the car behind me, and pressed down on the accelerator. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I was going to make it on my own, and I was going to succeed. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven your parents and sister? Or would you have cut ties completely? What do you think is the right balance between standing up for yourself and maintaining family relationships when trust has been broken? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions might help others facing similar situations. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Hey there, I'm Harper, a 28-year-old marketing executive. So picture this, life's perfect. I've got a great job, amazing friends, and I'm engaged to Mark Davis, this super charming lawyer I've been with for 3 years. Pretty sweet, right? Well, hold that thought. The crown jewel of my life? This stunning antique diamond ring from my late grandmother. It's been in my family forever, and Mark proposed with it. Talk about romantic. That ring is absolutely breathtaking. My best friend Lisa gushed one day over coffee. "You're so lucky Mark used it for the proposal." I couldn't help but beam. I know, right? It means the world to me. At work, my coworker Jack always seemed to hover nearby. "Hey, Harper, need help with that project?" he'd ask, flashing a friendly smile. "Thanks, Jack, but I've got it covered," I'd reply, completely unaware of his crush. Then there was Vanessa, Mark's ex. She'd pop up now and then, stirring the pot. "Oh, Mark mentioned grabbing lunch to catch up," she'd say casually when we bumped into each other at a local cafe. I'd force a smile. "That's nice. I'm sure you two have a lot to talk about." Later, I prettied up with Mark. "Babe, I ran into Vanessa today. She mentioned you guys had lunch." "Oh yeah, just a quick bite." "No big deal," he shrugged. I tried to brush it off, but a knot would form in my stomach. "You could have mentioned it," I'd say. "Didn't think it was worth bringing up," he'd reply. "You know you're the only one for me." And like an idiot, I believed him. We were planning our wedding after all. "You're overthinking it," Lisa would assure me on our wine nights. "Mark's crazy about you." So I pushed my doubts aside. I had the perfect job, the perfect fiancé, the perfect life. Or so I thought. But little did I know, my world was about to unravel. As Mark and I dove into wedding planning, something felt off. He started acting strange, always glued to his phone and working late. That nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I finally confronted him. "What's with all the late nights?" "Big case, babe, you know how it is," he replied, not even looking up from his phone. I tried to sneak a peek at his screen. "Who were you texting?" He quickly snatched the phone away. "Just work stuff." "Don't be so nosy." That stung. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. "You okay, Harper?" "You seem distracted," Jack asked, concern in his eyes. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just wedding stress, you know." He nodded sympathetically. "If you need anything, I'm here." Later, I met Lisa for lunch and spilled everything. "Girl, you're just stressed about the wedding," she reassured me. "Mark's crazy about you." I wanted to believe her, but doubt was creeping in. Maybe you're right, I'm probably overreacting. But then it happened. I was tidying up the apartment when I found it, a receipt for an insanely expensive necklace. My heart raced. Our anniversary was months away, and my birthday had just passed. When Mark got home, I couldn't hold back. "What's this?" I thrust the receipt at him. He paled. "Where did you find that?" "Does it matter?" "Who's it for, Mark?" It's for my mom's birthday," he stammered. I scoffed. "Your mom's birthday was 2 months ago. Try again." "Jesus, Harper, why are you snooping through my stuff?" "Snooping? It was on the floor. Who's the necklace for?" He stormed off, leaving me standing there, hurt and confused. After that, I started paying more attention. Mark was constantly texting someone saved as V in his phone. My mind immediately jumped to Vanessa. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who's V?" He looked like a deer caught in headlights. "What? In your phone? You're always texting V, is it Vanessa?" "It's a work contact," he said, way too quickly. I didn't buy it, but I was too tired to argue. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my grandmother's ring feeling heavier than ever on my finger. What was happening to us? The next day at work, Jack noticed my mood. "Rough night?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "You could say that." He hesitated, then said, "Look, I know it's not my place, but if you ever need to talk." I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it." As I left the office that evening, I made a decision. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. Little did I know, the truth would be more devastating than I could have imagined. It was my grandmother's birthday, and I woke up feeling bittersweet. I reached for my jewelry box, eager to wear her ring in her memory. But when I opened it, my heart stopped. The ring was gone. "Mark? Mark, wake up." I shook him frantically. "What's wrong?" He mumbled, still half asleep. "The ring, my grandmother's ring. It's missing." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Are you sure? Maybe you misplaced it?" No. This can't be happening." Mark watched me, an odd expression on his face. "Babe, calm down. We'll find it." But as the hours ticked by and we turned the apartment upside down, the ring was nowhere to be found. I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and heartbroken. "Mark, that ring meant everything to me. How could it just disappear?" He sat beside me, his eyes avoiding mine. I don't know. Something in his voice made me look up. "Mark, what are you telling me?" He fidgeted, still not meeting my gaze. "Nothing, I'm sure it'll turn up." But I knew in that moment. "You took it, didn't you?" "What?" "No. Don't lie to me," I shouted, jumping to my feet. "What did you do with my grandmother's ring?" For hours, he denied it, accusing me of being paranoid and not trusting him. But I stood my ground, demanding the truth, until finally he broke. Okay, I sold it." The world stopped. "You what?" "I sold it. I needed the money." I couldn't breathe. "For what? What was so important that you sold my family heirloom?" He hesitated, then whispered, "For Vanessa's birthday gift." The room spun. "Vanessa? Your ex-girlfriend, Vanessa." "I'm sorry, Sarah. We've been seeing each other for a few months now." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "How could you?" "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to." "Get out." My voice was ice cold. "Sarah, please. Get out." He scrambled to his feet, grabbing his jacket. "I'll get the ring back, I promise." Don't bother. Just get out of my sight. As soon as the door slammed behind him, I crumbled to the floor, sobbing. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally reached for my phone and dialed Lisa's number. Lisa, can you come over? I need you. She must have heard the desperation in my voice because she didn't ask questions. I'm on my way. While I waited for her, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. Hey, you weren't at work today. Everything okay? I stared at the message, tears blurring my vision. How could I even begin to explain? When Lisa arrived, she found me still on the floor, surrounded by tissues. Oh honey, she whispered, pulling me into a hug. What happened? Through sobs, I told her everything, the missing ring, Mark's confession, the affair with Vanessa. That bastard. Lisa hissed. I'll kill him. Despite everything, I found myself laughing weakly. Get in line. As Lisa helped me to the couch, my phone buzzed again. It was Jack. Sarah, I'm worried. Please let me know you're okay. Lisa saw the message and raised an eyebrow. You should tell him. I nodded, typing out a reply with shaky hands. Mark cheated. Sold my grandma's ring. Could use a friend. His response was immediate. I'm here if you need anything. Anything at all. As I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of my perfect life, a strange calm came over me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my revenge. After the shock wore off, I knew I couldn't let Mark get away with what he'd done. I called Lisa and Jack over to strategize. We need to make him pay, Lisa said, pacing my living room. Jack nodded. I've got a buddy who's a private investigator. He could dig up some dirt on Mark. I smiled for the first time in days. Let's do it. We hired the PI, and boy did he deliver. Turned out, Mark wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief too. He'd been embezzling money from his law firm to fund his lavish lifestyle with Vanessa. Holy, I muttered, looking at the evidence. He's been stealing for months. Lisa's eyes gleamed. This is perfect. We can take him down. We crafted our plan carefully. First, I anonymously tipped off Mark's firm about his embezzlement. Then, I exposed his cheating to our entire social circle and his family. The fallout was spectacular. Mark lost his job and was facing potential jail time. His reputation was in tatters, and I watched from afar as his perfect life crumbled around him. One day, I ran into Vanessa at the grocery store. She looked terrible. Sarah, she said, approaching cautiously. I'm sorry. I raised an eyebrow. For what? Sleeping with my fiancé or spending my grandmother's ring? She flinched. Both. I didn't know about the ring, I swear. And Mark, he's not who I thought he was. Karma's a asterisk, isn't it? I said, walking away. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work. My boss noticed my renewed focus. Sarah, I'm impressed. How would you feel about a promotion? I grinned. I feel pretty damn good about it. As for Jack, he finally worked up the courage to ask me out. Look, Sarah, I know you've been through a lot, but I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab dinner sometime. I hesitated, then smiled. You know what? I'd like that. Months passed. I was killing it at work, enjoying my new relationship with Jack, and finally feeling like myself again. Then came the night of the charity gala. I walked in wearing a stunning new dress and the ring I'd bought myself, a symbol of my independence. And there, working as a valet, was Mark. Our eyes met. He looked terrible, disheveled, tired, broken. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something, pity, maybe, regret. But then I remembered my grandmother's ring, the lies, the betrayal. I walked past him, head held high, without a second glance. Inside, Jack was waiting for me. You okay? He asked, noticing my expression. I took a deep breath and smiled. Never better. As we mingled with the crowd, I caught snippets of gossip about Mark's downfall. But I didn't care anymore. I was done living in the past. Ready to dance, Jack asked, offering his hand. I took it, feeling truly happy for the first time in ages. Absolutely. As we swayed to the music, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my power, my happiness. And I'd done it. I'd won. The story's over, but I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed Mark's embezzlement or kept that information as leverage? What would you have done differently for revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hi, I'm Martha. I'm almost 68 now, and I've been a widow for a while. This big old house has been my home for over 4 decades, filled with more memories than I can count, some good, some bad. I've lived here so long that I swear these walls in my heartbeat. My kids, Tom and Sarah, are all grown up now, but we've always stayed close. They visit every weekend to help me with yard work and bring groceries. I thought we had a good rhythm, but lately things have started to change. My body's not what it used to be. Arthritis in my hands makes cooking painful, and cleaning the house is an uphill battle. Some days, just getting out of bed feels like running a marathon. So when Tom and Sarah showed up last Sunday with serious looks on their faces, I knew something was up. "Mom, we need to talk," Tom said, looking worried. "What's going on?" "You two look like someone died," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Sarah spoke up. "We're worried about you, Mom. Living here all alone isn't safe." "I'm fine, really," I insisted, though even I didn't believe my own words. Tom leaned in. "Mom, we've been thinking. What if you signed the house over to us?" I nearly choked on my tea. "What? Why would I do that?" "It's not what you think," Sarah said quickly. "We take care of everything, the bills, the maintenance, all of it. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And most importantly," Tom added, "we'd make sure you're taken care of right here at home. No nursing homes, no strangers, just us." I'll admit, it sounded tempting. No more struggling with the vacuum or trying to remember if I paid the electric bill. But still, I hesitated. This house is all I have left of their father. Sarah gently took my hand. "Dad would want you to be safe and cared for, Mom. That's all we want too." They kept talking, painting this rosy picture of how things could be. Me, comfortable in my own home, and them handling everything. It sounded like a dream. After a while, I agreed, if you really think it's for the best. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. I signed dotted lines and initialed here and there, and before I knew it, the house, the home I have lived in for 40 years, was no longer mine. But surprisingly, I felt relieved, like a weight had lifted. My kids loved me, and I trusted they would take care of me. Everything was going to be fine. "To new beginnings," Tom said, raising a glass of champagne after the final papers were signed. Sarah hugged me tight. "We've got you, Mom, always." I smiled, looking around at the familiar walls, the faded photos, the worn furniture. Everything was going to stay the same, just better. Or so I thought. But things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. My health took a nosedive. One day, I was managing, and the next, I was struggling to make it to the bathroom without feeling like I'd pass out. Tom and Sarah started acting strange, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear, cutting conversations short when I walked into the room. At first, I figured they were just worried, but something felt off. Then, out of nowhere, this nurse showed up. "This is Nurse Jenkins' mom," Sarah said, all sweet-like. "Just a routine checkup." Nurse Jenkins poked and prodded, asking a million questions. "How often do you fall? Can you dress yourself? Do you remember to take your meds?" I answered as best I could, feeling more like a lab specimen than a person. After she left, I overheard Tom and Sarah talking in the kitchen. "Nurse Jenkins says she needs round-the-clock care," Tom whispered. "We can't provide that," Sarah replied. "Maybe it's time we consider other options." My blood ran cold. Other options? What does that mean? I didn't have to wait long to find out. I was supposed to be napping, but I snuck downstairs when I heard them talking again. "Sunny Meadows has an opening next month," Tom said. "I know it's a nursing home, but they have great reviews. Mom would be well taken care of there," Sarah sighed. I couldn't believe my ears. A nursing home? After they promised to take care of me here? I burst into the room, anger surging through me. "So this was your plan all along? Get me to sign over the house and then ship me off?" They looked like deer in headlights. "Mom, it's not like that," Sarah started. "Then what is it like?" I demanded, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you two played me for a fool. "Mom, your health is declining. You need professional care," Tom said, trying to reason with me. "What I need is for my children to keep their promises," I shouted, surprising even myself. "We're doing this for your own good," Sarah insisted. I laughed bitterly. My own good? Or for your convenience? The argument went on for hours. They threw around words like safety and quality of life, but all I heard was betrayal. In the end, it didn't matter what I said. The house wasn't mine anymore, and it seemed neither were my choices. A week later, I'm sitting in a sterile room at Sunny Meadows Nursing Home, surrounded by boxes of the few possessions they let me bring. The walls are too white, the air reeks of disinfectant, and the sound of old folks moaning drifts down the hall. Tom and Sarah are getting ready to leave, but I can't even look at them. "We'll visit every week," Sarah promises, her voice thick with tears. "Don't bother," I mutter. Tom tries to hug me, but I pull away. "Mom, please understand," he pleads. "Understand what?" I snap. "That my own children lied to me, took my home, and dumped me here." "Oh, I understand plenty." They leave, and I'm alone, truly alone for the first time in my life. The room feels like a prison cell. The bed's too small, the window's too high, and I curl up on the unfamiliar mattress, letting the tears come. This isn't how it was supposed to be. This isn't what they promised. I gave them everything, and this is how they repay me, by locking me away like some dirty secret. As I lie there, listening to the strange noises of my new home, one thought keeps circling in my mind. Asterisk, this isn't over, asterisk, they think they've won, that I'll just roll over and accept this. But they don't know me very well if they believe that. This is just the beginning. I'll be damned if I go down without a fight. The first few weeks at Sunny Meadows were hell. I felt like a fish out of water, gasping for air in this cold, sterile place. The nurses were kind enough, but it wasn't home. It wasn't my life. One day, I was sitting in the common room, staring out the window and feeling sorry for myself, when this spitfire of an old lady plopped down next to me. "You look about as happy as a cat in a bathtub," she said, grinning. "Name's Gladys. What's your story, honey?" For some reason, I spilled my guts to her. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, like she'd seen it all before. "Damn kids," Gladys muttered when I finished. "Sounds a lot like what happened to me. But you know what? I ain't rolling over, and neither should you." She told me about her grandson, Mike, a hotshot lawyer who specializes in elder rights. The next thing I knew, Mike was sitting across from me, all serious in his fancy suit. "Mrs. Martha, what happened to you is not okay," he said, his voice firm. "It's called elder abuse, and it's illegal." "Elder abuse," I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth, but they're my children. Mike leaned forward. "Family or not, what they did was wrong. You have rights, and we're going to fight for them." He explained terms like financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and neglect. It was like he was speaking a new language, but one that finally gave words to what I'd been feeling. "You're not alone," Mike assured me. "I've seen cases like yours before. We can build a case, but we need evidence." So I started documenting everything, every broken promise, every unanswered call, every detail of how they tricked me out of my home. Gladys introduced me to other residents with similar stories. Edna, whose son emptied her bank accounts, and George, whose daughter dumped him here and never visits. We started meeting regularly, sharing our stories and supporting each other. It felt good to have a purpose again. "We're not just going to sit here and take it," George declared one day. "We're going to fight back." Mike put us in touch with a support group for elder rights, and suddenly, I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an advocate, a fighter. I started physical therapy, determined to get stronger. I researched laws and regulations, filling notebook after notebook with information. One night, lying in bed, I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry, and that anger was fuel. "You picked the wrong old lady to mess with, kids," I muttered to myself. "Mama's coming for you, and she's bringing hell with her." The next morning, I march into Mike's office, leaving my walker abandoned in the corner. "I'm ready," I announce, fire burning in my chest. "Let's take them down." Mike grins. "That's what I like to hear, Mrs. Martha. Let's get to work." As we sit and plan our next move, I feel more alive than I have in months. My kids thought they could brush me aside, forget about me, but they're about to learn the hard way. Never underestimate a pissed-off old lady with nothing left to lose. This fight is just getting started, and I'll be damned if I don't come out on top. They wanted to put me away and forget about me. Well, I'm about to become unforgettable. Mike and I hit the ground running, building our case brick by brick. We gathered every scrap of evidence, bank statements, property records, even recorded conversations. It was like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle of betrayal. Meanwhile, elder abuse cases started making headlines. Some big-shot celebrities' kids had pulled the same stunt, and suddenly, everyone was talking about it. I saw my chance and took it. I went on local news, told my story, and before I knew it, it went viral. My wrinkled face was plastered across the internet, my story shared thousands of times. People were outraged, demanding justice. Tom called me, panic in his voice. "Mom, what are you doing? This is destroying us." "Karma's a asterisk, isn't it?" I shot back before hanging up. Sarah lost her job at the bank. Tom's law firm put him on leave. Their perfect little lives were crumbling, and I couldn't find it in me to care. The state launched a full-scale investigation into Sunny Meadows and my case. Turns out, there was a lot of shady stuff going on there that had nothing to do with me. Mike was in his element, presenting our case to the DA. "We've got them dead to rights," he assured me. "They're going down." When Tom and Sarah were charged with elder abuse and fraud, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. The day of the trial came, and I walked into that courtroom with my head held high. Gladys by my side for support. "Tell us what happened, Mrs. Martha," the prosecutor said. So I did. I laid it all out, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. I looked my children in the eye as I spoke and saw the shame on their faces. "I gave you everything," I set my voice steady. "My love, my trust, my home. And you threw it all away for what? A quick buck." The jury didn't take long to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. As part of their sentence, Tom and Sarah had to forfeit all assets gained through their fraud, including their own homes. Karma indeed. But it wasn't over. My story struck a nerve. Politicians started falling over themselves to propose new laws protecting the elderly. They called it the Martha Act *. Imagine that. After it was all said and done, Gladys made me an offer I couldn't refuse. "Come live with me, you old bat," she said affectionately. "My place is too big for just me anyway." And here I am, starting a new chapter. Gladys and I, well, we've become quite the dynamic duo. We travel around, speaking at conferences, sharing our stories, and fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. I won't lie. There are days when I miss Tom and Sarah, days when I wonder if I did the right thing. But then I remember all the other Marthas out there, all the mothers and fathers being taken advantage of by their own flesh and blood. And I know I did what needed to be done. My name is Martha, and this is my story. A story of betrayal, yes, but also of resilience. Of finding strength when you think you've got nothing left, of standing up and saying no more asterisk. To all you kids out there thinking of pulling a fast one on your parents, remember this. We may be old, but we're not dead, and we sure as hell aren't going down without a fight. So think twice before you cross us, 'cause karma? She's always watching, and she's got a mean right hook. Now, here's something to chew on. If you were in Martha's shoes, would you have taken your kids to court or tried to forgive them? There's no easy answer. On one hand, they betrayed her trust. On the other, they're still family. So where do you draw the line between justice and mercy? Drop your thoughts in the comments.